Hello macro students! My first two videos were made at school in my classroom, and now this one is being made from my living room at home. So we'll see how this goes, but this is probably how we will move forward. Alright, so by this point in time you have watched the first three videos on the PPF made by Scott Walla from the St. Louis Federal Reserve. I got to meet the guy once, I was like, wow, look at this YouTube celebrity. I'm kidding, don't worry. All right, so here we go. So how is the production possibilities frontier model used to show economics concepts? And we're gonna start off with just kind of reminding ourselves what the point of the PPF or production possibilities frontier is. So you might wanna draw a simple one. Okay, we know from the first three videos, some of them look like this with a straight line PPF, and some of them look like this with a bowed out PPF. We know that it's a very simple model of the economy. They sort of pretend that an economy only makes two things, even though we know an economy makes thousands of things. We're just going to pretend for this simple model that an economy will only make two things. Kind of your classic example of what we put on a PPF is guns and butter, to kind of demonstrate the idea that as a society, we need to make choices between, are we going to make more stuff for like the military and defense, the guns, or make more stuff for the people that they can use and eat to live, like the butter. But anyway, so we always label our X and our Y axes. So we can label them guns and butter. You can label it good A and good B. The St. Louis Federal Reserve videos labeled it widgets and gadgets. By the way, a widget and a gadget are just terms for like a thing. All right, so why do we have this weird PPF? What's the point? Well, we can demonstrate some big ideas. So we're going to use it to demonstrate efficiency, opportunity cost, and economic growth. And let's just remind ourselves of what those three things mean. Just give ourselves some really quick definitions there. So efficiency, it just simply means not wasting resources. And you know what our biggest resource is? Our biggest resource is time. But a resource, of course, is anything that we can use. All right, opportunity cost, a reminder, is that the PPF can show us opportunity cost, show us that we must make choices and trade-offs, meaning that if you want more of one thing, you have to give up some of something else. And then our PPF can show us economic growth. Economic growth is this idea that the whole economy can get bigger, which means that everybody can have more, right? Like more stuff, more resources. So economic growth is when the economy gets bigger and there are more resources for people. More resources for people. All right, there I go with the bad handwriting. I gotta calm it down. All right, so let's discuss why we have trade-offs. A trade-off means giving up one thing to get another. We discussed that a little bit in our last module. So why again? Because resources are scarce, or there is scarcity. And remember, therefore, okay, so this symbol here, therefore, we must make choices. Therefore, we experience opportunity costs and trade-offs, okay? So because there is scarcity, therefore we must make choices. Because we must make choices, therefore we experience opportunity costs and trade-offs. Okay, let's move on to page 2. Now remember, as we're going through these, if we go through a concept and you're sitting there thinking, I don't understand that, you're going to make a note of it, whether it could be right in your notes or somewhere else. And, I'm a big post-it person myself. You're going to make a big list of it, and then you're going to bring that to our Google Meets and ask me there. You can also email me and ask me there. All right, so how does the PPF show efficiency? So we just mentioned that efficiency means, you're not wasting any of your resources. So how does our PPF show that for us? All right, so efficiency, achieving maximum productivity with minimum wasted effort or expense. Okay. So therefore, if we have efficiency, if we have this maximum productivity, when we're not wasting effort or expense, we're not wasting time, we're not wasting resources, we're not wasting money. If we are efficient, that means three things for an economy. Number one, it means that all resources are being used. Now, here in macroeconomics, kind of the biggest thing that we care about are people. We care about jobs, and jobs, or people having jobs, is the people are one of our biggest resources as an economy, as a country. So if all resources are being used, that therefore means that people have jobs. And that, of course, is a good thing. So I like to put little smiley faces in my notes to just remind me, oh yeah, that's a good thing. All right, number two, so if we have efficiency, that means all resources are being used, and it means that we cannot get more of one thing without giving up something else, which is kind of a sad face. Cannot get more of one thing without giving up something else. Sad face. And you guys have probably had that experience, especially with your time, where your time is so full and you've got so many activities that you're just like, I can't fit anything else in. Probably not in the last 6 months, but you've had that experience. All right. Number three, you cannot make someone better off without making someone else worse off. Like if all the stuff is being used, that means that one person can't get more of something without somebody else getting less of something. And that's also a sad face. So number three, cannot make someone better off without making someone else worse off. Sad face. Okay, so that is just to kind of explain to you what life is like in this world of efficiency. All right, so the PPF shows us efficiency, but it also shows us inefficiency, which means that it's the wasting or failing to make the best use of time or resources. It means that some resources are not being used or used well. A big example of inefficiency is unemployment. That means that people who want jobs don't have jobs. All right, definitely sad face there. Okay, so we're going to go down here and we're going to show on a PPF where that efficient part is and where that inefficient part is. So let's just draw a straight line PPF. We're going to label our y-axis guns and our x-axis butter. And we're going to put 3 points on here. We're going to put point A inside the line. We're going to put point B on the line. And we're going to put point C outside of the line. And one other thing we're going to label, this line is our PPF. That is our production possibilities frontier. So point A is inside the line. As you learned in the last videos, that when you get to the line, that is your efficiency. That is your possibilities. That means everything is being utilized. So if you're inside the line, that means you can't have, like, it means you could make more guns and more butter, but for some reason that economy is not. They could do better, but they're not. So that is inefficiency. In economics, we do not like inefficiency. Sad face. Any point on the line shows efficiency. That's where everything is being used. And anything outside the line is, at this time, not attainable or not feasible, which basically means you can't get it. It means that that economy does not have the resources to get more guns and more butter all at the same time beyond the PPF. So if we were to put some, numbers on here, 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3, we could see that, roughly at point A, they can have 1 gun and 1 butter. And at point B, it's kind of 2 and 2. And at point C, it's not quite 3 and 3, but that's okay. All right. So we can see that this economy could make 2 guns and 2 butter, but they don't have the resources to make like 3 guns and 2 butters or 3 guns and 3 butters. They just can't do that. They don't have those resources at this time. All right. Page 3. All right. So our question here is, how does the PPF show opportunity cost? All right. So this was gone over in the other videos, and we're going to go over it again here. So the straight line PPF, it shows constant opportunity cost. So constant means that it's always the same. So on this graph, it shows us, I got to lower it because I can't reach. On this graph, it shows us that if in order to get, every time they get 1 more butter, or excuse me, 1 more gun, they're going to give up 1 butter. Like, it's always the same. The ratio remains the same, whether it's like 1 to 1 or 2 to 1 or 3 to 1. That ratio is constant. And then the bowed out PPF, it shows increasing opportunity costs. Increasing. And like the last video showed us, this is more true to life. It shows that each time you get 1 more gun, you have to give up more and more butter. And that means that, some of our resources just aren't good at doing certain things, right? So let's say in this economy with only guns and only butter, right? Let's say they had this great farmland, and on the farmland were some cows, and on those cows grazed on the grass, and then they produced some great milk, and they turned it into butter, right? Well, let's say then that they were like, no, we need more guns. We're going to change this land into gun-producing land. Well, maybe there aren't a lot of workers in that area to produce guns. Maybe that land is really good for farming, but it's not really good for mining iron ore, which they use to make steel. So it means that in order to get more and more of one thing, you're giving up even more and more of the rest. And I think of that in terms of when I was in college and I would study, and I would think of like, okay, I could kind of figure it out in my head. I was kind of good at that. I could figure out, okay, I have a test coming up. If I don't study for the test at all, I'll probably fail. If I study for the test for like 2 hours, I'll probably get a C. If I study for 3 hours, I'll probably get a B. But in order to get an A, I would probably have to study for like 6 hours. And then I wouldn't do it. Or I'd be like, okay, to study for 1 hour, all I have to do is give up some TV time. But then if I study for 2 hours, I'm giving up like TV and a chance to have dinner with my friends. If I study for 3 hours, I'm giving up like TV, dinner with my friends, and like going to, I don't know, a party, right? So like then I'd be like, whoa, like these opportunity costs are getting way too big. I'll just take the B. So that's kind of the way I think of those increasing opportunity costs. So the PPF shows opportunity costs by demonstrating, that getting more of one thing costs getting less of another. Sorry. Okay. So we get more of one thing and then we have to get less of another. And if we look at the PPFs, we will see that. You know, if we're on the PPF, if I am getting 2 guns and 1 butter, if I want 3 guns, I have to give up butter. And the same thing on the boat out PPF. All right, page 4. All right, how does our PPF show economic growth? All right, so we are going to draw a boat out PPF and we're going to put a dot and a label A on there to show that. The dot shows where the economy is. All right, so, and we're going to, shoot, I kind of put this in the wrong spot, but, so this original PPF here, we're going to label that PPF1. And then we're going to draw a new PPF to the outside of that. And we're going to label that one PPF2. And we're going to put the letter B on there. And then we put a little arrow to show that originally our PPF was here originally to begin with. And then something happened that caused it to grow and come out here. Originally, they could not get to point B. They did not have the resources. But economic growth happened, and therefore a new PPF was made, and then they can get to point B. So it means that we can have more butter without giving up any guns. And that is a happy thing in economics, like this idea of we can have more of both. All right, so a couple of things with these graphs. So PPF1, that means that was the original thing, the original place the economy was at. PPF2 means that the economy changed and something happened and it grew. Now, if we were to add numbers to our graph here, then we would see that, you know, they could have more guns and more butter at the same time if there's economic growth. Well, what causes economic growth? A couple of different things. Number one, if we have more factors of production, we can have economic growth because that means we have more resources. So land, if they find new natural resources, that will cause economic growth. Okay, if they find like a bunch of new oil or they start cutting down a new forest, I'm not saying there aren't bad things to that, right? We all know like the environmental implications of that, but it will cause economic growth. Labor, well, we can have economic growth if there are more workers. Now there are 2 ways to get more workers. Number one is with more babies, right? More babies, they grow up and they turn into workers. But the biggest way that the United States gets more workers is through immigration. So immigration can cause economic growth in a country. All right, next, physical capital can cause economic growth. It means that if we build more factories and infrastructure, that might be a new word for you. Infrastructure, that means the things that make our world work that we don't even often think about or we can't really see, like the pipes under the ground, the power lines, our internet connections, especially these days. So infrastructure, if we can build our infrastructure, we can build our economy. All right, and then human capital, we build our human capital, by more education. By educating people, they become more productive, more innovative, coming up with new ideas, and then we can grow our economy that way. So we can have economic growth by having those getting more factors of production, and we can have economic growth with advancements in technology. And a couple of different ways we see that. We can access land or natural resources previously unavailable. A big example of that is about 10 years, maybe a little more, they began getting natural gas out of the ground in North Dakota through a process called hydrofracking. Now, hydrofracking is not all good. It has some major economic implications, but it did indeed grow our economy, and because we had access to new natural resources that we didn't have before. Advancements in technology, it means that we can do more with resources and materials. We kind of saw that in the video where, you know, they became more productive. Let's add that here. And that, so both of these, labor can produce more in a day. That would be more productivity with our workers, more productivity. So those are the things that can cause economic growth. And don't forget to add your summary to the end of your notes on each module. And then your next step is to read Module 3 in the textbook. And as you're reading, either add to your notes that we took today or take all new notes on like notebook paper or plain paper or whatever. All right, thank you everybody.